What I'm showing on the screen is what we talked about last week. And sorry, I'm just managing the call here. And so last week we talked about Andy and Chris being super helpful, trying the P4 DPDK compiler and seeing if there were gaps and things like that. And we talked about presenting PR 308, which was going to be, service tunnel private link. And I guess this one's going to be pushed by another week because it's not ready quite yet. I checked with Marian and Prince this morning, and this one's just not ready this morning. So we'll push that one by another week. And then let's see. So Andy was going to try and see if he could execute a process here if he had time. And Marian was curious if we could execute this on real DPDK backend software. And then we talked a bit about Andy's pull request here, 331. And so, and then Saad wanted to make sure we had an open tracking item for not only the fact that we looked at connection tracking, but then the work item to actually implement the connection tracking. So I went ahead and made a work item there. So that's what we covered last week. And was wondering if anyone had an update or comment on anything since the week has passed.
Andy has not yet joined. I can see.
That's okay.
But we are trying to see how we can execute the DPDK backend P4 program. Yeah, I'm asking Anton to help with that as well.
Yeah. So, maybe Gerald missed the call last time. Maybe we could quickly cover what we were trying to do.
Sure.
But for Gerald, would that be okay? I think you guys are better at explaining it than I am.
Do you want me to pitch in here?
Yeah, Chris, that'd be great. Yeah.
Okay, so a couple weeks ago, we talked about, we were talking about the challenges in getting the BMV2 model and P4C compiler modified to handle statefulness and dash requirements. And Andy Fingerhut of Intel started talking about progress on the P4 DPDK. We had a nice discussion about that, and he volunteered to try to compile our dash code against the P4C DPDK backend. And he was able to do so experimentally with a few code modifications. He and I worked together to iron out some of that, and I created a tool chain and Docker images for him to compile it with. So we've got kind of a repeatable recipe now. There is a pull request with modified dash P4 code that has the appropriate if-defs in it to be able to compile for P4C, for BMV2 or DPDK. So we've got this sort of stake in the ground where we can compile the code for either target. So the next phase is, can we actually run P4 DPDK? And so there's an open task to actually get a P4 DPDK image running and try to execute dash code on it and see what happens. And that's what Reshma was alluding to, that there's some work beginning in that area. So it's kind of an experiment right now.
Right, and I think, thanks, Chris, for summarizing this one. This is excellent. One thing is that, much like how we say BMV2 as the backend target, for DPDK, it is called P4 DPDK target. P4-DPDK target. And then this is where, of course, the compiled code is loaded there, the compiled P4 code. From the P4 code, the C code is generated, and the C code is then compiled, and it gets loaded into the P4 DPDK target. And then one can go ahead and start communicating or interfacing this one through P4 runtime to start adding table entries and so forth, right? But one of the things, perhaps for everyone's sake, is that when we were working on the BMV2 side, it was based on the V1 model architecture. And by moving into the DPDK, we are now moved into the PNA architecture. So that's one of the subtle differences as well.
Yeah,
that makes sense, Gerald.
Yeah, it sounds cool.
Can I
Right.
share a screenshot real quick?
Of course you can. Yeah, let me stop presenting. Go ahead.
Okay, let me find the right widget to do that with.
It's the up arrow, the up share arrow.
Yeah, I've got
Mhm.
to get all my screens organized here.
Yeah, no problem.
You know how it is.
I
Too many
do. Believe me. Yeah,
So can you see this image?
yeah.
So this is
Yep.
this is pretty old. This was like aspirational way back when. And
Mhm.
we have this lower part working for a long time now. That's what's running every day in the CI/CD. We're now aspiring to get this working. And so all we need now, we've got the code compiling and building. I've actually got CI/CD pipeline ready for this as well. And so Andy's got his pull request sitting in the back drawer, and I added to it to do all this GitHub stuff and create a Docker image to build it. Now we want to get this running, get a proof of existence of this manually. And if it shows promise and works, we can incorporate it into the Dash pipeline and have these working in parallel. There's no reason why we can't have both for a while we continue this science project. So this is the V1 Plus, I call it, because it's a modified V1 architecture that's underway. Right now it's just V1 because we really haven't got the modified version yet. It's, still work in progress, kind of suspended. So this will be the true P&A architecture, which is community supported. It's like a first-class citizen in the P4 world. And whereas this is kind of a Dash specific project that's a little bit stalled out. So I think the intent is if this works and we can get this to support our use cases, it's going to be a legitimate, P4 community project that's got a number of people working on it all the time, and it gets talked about. The P&A architecture has working groups, etc. This might be a worthwhile thing to focus on long term, but it's still still up in the air. Does anyone agree or disagree with that assessment?
Yeah,
No, I completely
thank you,
agree with
Chris.
him.
Yeah, that sounds, thank you for summarizing everything. I think Andy is also joined now. I just want to say that the P4 DPDK pipeline runs in the host, as we know, and as Chris mentioned, it is PNA compliant and all that. So it will work with the Sonic not bound. So suppose if we have Sonic with the Dash container, and since we are now going to be able to, of course, there is work there, able to run Dash P4 in the P4 DPDK backend. We can have Sonic with Dash container as not bound programming all of the Dash APIs in the same manner in the DPDK like we expect it to work on the real hardware. And then it would, from the not bound point of view, it would work with Cythrift or Sonic with Dash.
Yeah, that's good. So one quick question, Chris, as part of doing this work of repeatable recipe of compiling the code, and so far, just wanted to understand where we are at. Are we able to now generate the .so file or that that one can basically load into the backend?
A .so file for
So I was just
side?
looking at the pipeline from the toolchain pipeline. When you have a P4 code, and from P4 code, it actually generates the C code, right? If I understand correctly from the DPTK backend compiler, and then after the C code, you compile the C code, and then eventually you generate the .so, which is just the library, like dynamically loadable library, which essentially gets downloaded into the target, which happens to be your P4 DPDK backend, right? Is that?
I mean, there might be. I think there is a C file intermediate, and there's an intermediate step there somewhere, but it's not meant to be human readable or editable. It's just another intermediate step from P4 source code into running on DPDK software switch.
Oh, I see. So so maybe then I had a wrong understanding, because I was just going through multiple different videos from Kristen, I guess, who is one of the architects in Intel, that who was presented in 2019, 2021, and 2022. So initially it used to be the .spec file, and then went
And there
onto
still is one.
Right.
There's a
Okay, there
spec
still is
file
one.
that gets turned into a C file that gets compiled into something, maybe a .o file. But yeah, you can look at those C files and .o files if you want, but most people don't want to. There's no reason
Yeah,
to
no, I
if
don't want to
everything's
either.
working.
Yeah, no, I don't want to look at it. It's just that I wanted to see that, in our work that we are doing as part of this PR, at what stage we are in right now.
Well, PR.
We're in a stage where it compiles without syntax errors with the open source P4C DPDK. We have not run it on the DPDK software switch to see if it's working as expected. Working towards that step, but not there yet.
So
unless Chris has beat me there.
Yeah. So the next big task would be, as a deliverable, something that produces an image. It doesn't have to have P4 runtime server. Can be ignored. It produces, let's say, a Docker image that contains everything here, and all we care about is that it has a socket interface. And this tool chain to do all this won't necessarily be part of Dash. Dash may invoke it, but it's probably an external, project like P4 DPDK, some kind of a GitHub project, and we need to compile some kind of an image that's probably a Docker image that's all of this, and all we care about is we can talk to it over this socket. Similarly, what Resham was talking about, having a full Sonic stack, there would need to be some external project that replaces this with syncd. So it's the syncd daemon. It produces this entire image, and that would be something that you could drop right into Sonic. All right, so those are like two big deliverables. I don't know all the steps to get there.
Yeah, for the syncd part, what will be linked into the syncd will be the SO that will include the
Right.
P4 DPDK and programming layers and the libsci for that. All
Yeah.
of these components.
I don't think so, guys. I don't think this is the way it's going to be, because guys, just imagine the way we basically are talking about here right now. At least my understanding is that the SI interface is the P4 runtime, right? So if we continue to basically have that part, then essentially you're just making P4 runtime calls to some other subsystem, no?
I beg to disagree. That's just an artifact of the current BMV2 approach for convenience. The P4 DPDK is not going to use P4 runtime at all. So just ignore this.
We may or may not use it, but if we
Okay.
were to link it into the syncd, there is no need for another P4 runtime because the pipeline will run in the host, and then since it will all be part of the syncd, we can make direct function calls.
Yeah, see, this TDI is the mapping layer. It's the abstraction layer. This is all compiled. There's no need for a remote call. This was a convenience for BMV2 because it was already there, but a more efficient approach is directly compiled in. And
I
so,
see. Okay, so
Chris, but you still need to generate SI implementation to call it.
Oh yes, yeah. Whoever's doing this P4 DPDK SI somehow has to make all this put together, but it doesn't mean it's going to resemble the Dash version to date, right?
Oh, it doesn't have to. Like, we only care about APIs, so we don't break anything. But on the other side of it, whatever the layer it uses, it has to be there, because otherwise you cannot configure it.
I will mention, Chris. Sorry.
So Hanif's comment is valid because we need to clarify that there will be a different libsci generation.
I will mention that I don't know the maturity of it, and I haven't tried it out myself, but the DPK implementation should be being developed a P4 runtime API interface as well, which might reduce the amount of extra code written to support DPDK instead of BMP2.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and if
that's
helpful, then if that helps reduce the amount of work, great.
Right, both can be done.
But I don't want.
Yeah, they can be both done, right? And because, for example, if someone wanted to use this in a Sonic pins environment, this would be handy, right? I think, or maybe not. But
even without pins, both methods can be used to program the DPDK.
So I guess without trying to stipulate how the tool chain is going to work, ultimately we want some kind of image that has either a thrift interface, right, or a syncd, which would actually have more of the standard Sonic interfaces to Redis, etc., right? And the goal is just to have an image that you can spin up and has the right interfaces. However this is plumbed, we'll learn more about that, I guess, as time goes on.
And for BMV2 today, you are using P4 runtime?
Yes, it's just like this. This code is auto-generated. Marian and team wrote the code to auto-generate this shim layer. So it translates side calls into P4 runtime calls. And so you're actually going over two sockets, side thrift, through an adapter layer, and then over another socket. That's what's working today. And you can see the activity if you run the code in a console. You can see the stuff going on.
Yeah. We can start with something like this, and then also have Sonic as another not bound here. Although this figure is upside down, Sonic will be not bound, and side thrift will be not bound as well.
Yeah, it could have been drawn differently. That's for sure. I probably should.
North is down.
This is for people in Australia.
Yeah.
I'm kidding. So anyway, that's where we're at. It's great that we've actually got to the point where we're talking about maybe this happening sometime in our lifetime. A year or two ago, this was just pretty pictures. Anyway, that's I'll stop sharing in case we have anything else. So does anyone have any guesstimates for when we might see some progress, or what are the next steps we might be able to see?
I'll chat privately with Reshma. She's been in contact with some Intel engineers who can perhaps help with the next step, which I see as, trying out P4 runtime API on DPDK on a running P4 code and seeing what happens.
That sounds good.
And writing out instructions on how to build that and run it.
Thank you. We could check back on that. Appreciate that.
Cool.
Yeah. And like I said, we'll push Service Tunnel Private Link to next week. I won't be here next week, but Yusuf will be here, and the usual suspects, Chris, Reshma, everyone. I'm trying to think, do we have anything else for this week? Guys on the call?
I wanted to ask Andy, your pull request, should we try to actually get that merged in, because it at least compiles the code, and we can, every time someone changes the code, at least we'll recompile it.
As long as it doesn't break anything you've got going on now on the BMV2 side, I don't see a reason why not, but that's up to others.
Oops, maybe review that pull request, right? 332 right there at the top.
I know, I think Hanif has given a few comments on it that I've responded to. I don't know if anybody else has commented or looked at it, but it's up to the group here whether they think it's worth merging in.
I guess I ought to do my own review and say, looks good to me or not, right?
Yeah.
I think you did, didn't you?
I don't know.
That's what Chris says. Go to your top level. Yeah, you did. Looks good to me. Right here.
That was your alternate self that works on nights.
Yeah, okay. I can remember. So if we look at the pull request, the files changed. It might be worth just kind of reviewing it briefly.
Okay.
So just a quick,
there's a lot of files that have been changed here.
Yeah, just a quick question on the testing part of the things. Of course, it compiles the DPDK. So for the BMV2, all the tests that we had passing, with this one, did we try with this PR that, they're all passing?
Well, no, we don't have a backend to execute yet. So this
No,
PR,
not on the DPDK. I'm talking on BMV2 because we want to
preserve.
preserve.
Did I break the BMV2 test?
Exactly.
Well, no, all you have to do to answer that question is to look at the actions in GitHub up top, and you can see that somewhere down below, go down to where it starts saying add if defs. See all those greens? If you go down, whoops, you don't
sorry,
need to
I'll
do
go
that.
back. Yeah,
Yeah,
sorry.
yeah.
Sorry.
So what
Yeah,
happens
no,
when you do a pull
I
request?
understand. Right.
Yeah, it runs the pipeline, so it's like a regression test on the repo. It stages it so that it builds everything again as if the code had been accepted.
Right.
So we have confidence that once we merge this, it doesn't break. Now, there's no guarantee it won't, because for one thing, it's going to have to push a Docker image to ACR for this new compile toolchain, and that hasn't been done until you accept the merge. But that's a small risk.
Right. No, but my question, Chris, is that, you know, in this, I definitely I had the knowledge, and that's why I should have been more clear in my question. Was I believe there are more test cases or tests that probably are beyond just, you know, this, or does this cover everything, right? You know, these actions, when somebody basically goes and commits it or issues a PR, do we run each and everything that is in our repository, or is it just, you know, a subset of it, right?
No, every time there's a pull request or a merge accept, it rebuilds everything from scratch except Docker images that can be pulled from ACR. Actually, it rebuilds them anyway locally. It does rebuild everything, and it runs all the side thrift and side challenger tests that we've committed.
Oh,
It's
okay,
right
good.
here on-
So that
It's a
He's here
answers
on the
complete
this
side,
one.
Chris.
It's a complete regression for every
Okay.
put.
Awesome.
If you just change a README, it's just going to do a spell check. But
Yeah.
if you change any line of P4 code, any Python, any C code, whatever, there's a whole lot of different file types. It basically rechecks everything, and it's pretty fast. It's only like 10 minutes for the whole thing.
Yep. Awesome.
Yeah, and also thanks. For just as a refresher to people, before you do a pull request, you know, and you're working on a branch, push it to your local fork. Your own GitHub actions should be enabled so you can look at them and see that they pass. You don't need to do a pull request. You shouldn't do a pull request until you've verified it in your own fork, because otherwise you're, you know, just running the risk of filling this up with, you know, X's, red X's instead of green checks. And you need to go into your own fork for your project, the Dash project, and enable GitHub actions. It's not done by default. But once you do that, you know, then you can see that it's working. So, for example, Christina, if you want to go back to the pull request, the main page for this pull request, you'll see at the top where it says requests to merge from a certain branch. If you click on that, if you click right there, you'll go into Andy's fork, and then that's his personal fork that's being merged from. Click on his actions up there. So see all about these are all the actions running in his, and that's where he merged my Docker files in. So basically the point is you can preview the success or failure of the CI pipeline in your own fork before you do a pull request to Dash repo. And that's the recommended, because you can catch a lot of mistakes quickly without it cluttering up, let's say, the Dash repos activity. It's kind of a good way to pre-check everything first. You really shouldn't do a pull request if you have failing pipeline in your own fork. Right?
Yeah, now I say that, you know, like, you know, LGTM from me also.
Okay.
That makes sense. You're always explaining mine to me, Chris. So yeah.
It's okay.
It's
We're
like
all students. I learn something new on GitHub with every
GitHub tutorial.
Time.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just barely a proficient user compared to some people.
Yeah. Okay, well, that's really all I had for today, unless you guys have something else or some Q&A, or Gerald, do you have anything, or Marian or VJ?
Nothing specific.
Okay. All right, great. So then I guess we'll.
No, not yet.
We'll wait to see how. I'm hearing an echo. I'm sorry. So I'll go ahead and close the call for today then, and send notes, and look forward to, Reshma and Andy talking with their people, about trying this out. And thank you very much for doing this. This is awesome. And thanks for the recap on the picture, Chris. So I think that was really helpful.
Yeah. We'll definitely get back soon as possible about this.
Oh yeah. Thank you. Thanks. Yeah. And again, next week it'll be Yusuf, Chris, and everyone. And I'm going to stop the recording.
I had a question, Christine, around the ARC agent changes. I think that Guhan was discussing last week. I mean,
Okay.
could we table that discussion at some point, maybe, next week? I don't know if Guhan has changes or he's on the call. It's not on the call today, but all the northbound changes.
Okay.
At least that's in the works that he mentioned.
And what's the specific question?
I at least want to understand the dash ARC agent changes that I believe in the works based on discussions that we had last week on the call. So when that may be coming, a little bit more details around that, perhaps.
This is probably related to the dash Sonic, dash container Sonic, and the dash changes in ARC agent.
And is that what we were talking where he was hoping to have something out in 2 months by May? Was that conversation?
Yeah.
Okay, so I don't see Prince on, so I'll have to check with him for sure. And that's it was VJ who was talking?
No, this is Murray.
Morale. Okay, yeah. Okay. Okay. I'll go ahead and check, okay?
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, and I'll get back to you. Okay, guys. Well, thank you.
Yep.
And I'm giving time back. I hope you have a good day.
Thanks a lot, Christina.
Yeah. Thanks
Okay.
a lot, Christina.
Talk
Have
to
a
you
good time
later.
off.
Yeah, thanks for for all the work and the progress. Appreciate it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thanks.